to sit with me and tell me a little bit about your experiences. So, before the Army, what were you doing? Were you in school or were you already out working?
I was out of school and working for about 6 months, and I was drafted, and this is hard to do. When I was drafted, went into the Army, and they sent me to Texas. I took basic training in a tank destroyer outfit in Camp Hood, Texas. Now it's Fort Hood, I guess. They made tore down the old plywood barracks and made brick ones out of it. But anyway, from there I went into STP training after a while at Fort Hood, Camp Hood, and we're on maneuvers, and my time there was interrupted. They decided to send me to school, and I went to the College of Mines in El Paso, the ASTP program, and I was there for a few months, and the program ended, and I was sent to the 12th Armored Division in Camp Barkley in Texas, and after some training there, while we went overseas.
Mm-hmm. Now, you said you were in the ASTP training at the School of Mines. What were they training you to do, or what school?
It was engineering, basic engineering. Yeah.
Okay.
The plan was that we would have graduated as engineers, and with a rank of second lieutenant. And I don't know why they think they need that many engineers, but there were a lot of us. Anyway, when that ended, then I went to a combat unit.
Very good. Now, a couple of quick questions to step back a little bit about going through basic training. Now, first off, where did you grow up? What part of the country?
Oh, right here in Indiana, central Indiana.
Okay. And you said you were working before you went in the Army. What kind of work were you doing?
I was in the General Motors plant in Anderson, Indiana, and I was working in production for 6 months, and then I was drafted. And when I got back after the war, well, I went back. They held a job for me, and after a little while, I got into engineering and spent the rest of my working career right there.
Now, after being drafted, how did you find Army life compared to your previous civilian life? Was it much of a shock for you? Or how different was it?
Oh, it was entirely different, you know. People from all over the country, you know, I met, and all different kind of people than the rural central Indiana people.
Very good. Now, you said you joined the 12th Armored when they were at Camp Barkley.
Yes.
And tell me about the shock of moving from Indiana down to Texas.
Well, it was awful hot and dry. I didn't like that.
And of course, you deployed from Camp Shanks in New York to go overseas, right?
Yeah, yes.
Anything about the voyage stick out in your mind?
Well, we went over on a ship that had an English crew, British, and the food was terrible. We didn't have bunks. We had to sleep in hammocks strung between the pipes down in the hold, and you couldn't lay on your sides. Those hammocks, the thing would wrap right around you. You had to lay on your back, and it wasn't very much fun.
Mm-hmm. So kind of a relief then to get to England and be on dry land again.
Yes, it was.
Now, and of course from there across the channel to France.
Yep.
And can you tell me, in the 17th Armored Infantry, what was your position? What was your job?
I was a rifleman in a machine gun squad.
Okay. And your duties, of course, being to, well, as a rifleman in a machine gun squad, you're basically there to protect the machine gunners.
Yeah, I guess so.
And any experiences in combat that you care to talk about, or anything that you remember vividly and want to pass on?
Well, most of my war stories I've told over and over again, and I hate to go through them again.
But bear in mind that now they're being recorded, and I've never heard them before.
We were after we got into real combat, we were attacking a small German town named Offendorf. And we didn't get into this town. We got caught out in an open field, and with a row of tanks ahead of us, and we were walking behind these tanks, and these tanks got caught out in this open field, and in a crossfire, woods off to our right, and there was artillery in there, and then the town ahead, and the tanks there, and our tanks were crossing this open field, and they got shot up really bad. There were half a dozen of them at one time, just burning out. And we had to retreat. The next thing I knew, we were going back into a town, and I didn't know it until later, years later, that we were going into another town called Herlesheim, which was practically joined Offendorf. And we got in there, and we were set up in some old foxholes the Germans had dug. And Buddy and I were in one hole, and other friends were in other holes nearby, and we noticed these foxholes were under trees. And knowing what happens when artillery hits trees, as tree bursts make it a pretty bad place to be underneath them. So we got a heavy wooden door from a house and covered most of our hole so we could duck back under it. And buddies in the next hole didn't bother to do that. And somewhere around midnight or something, the artillery or mortar started falling on us and hitting those trees, and we could hear the shrapnel hit this door. We were pretty thankful that we'd put it up there. But our buddies next hole didn't, and one of them got killed, and the other one was hurt pretty badly. So my buddy and I went over and got him, and we took him back to the house where the command post was set up, the company commander in there, took him down in the basement and put him on a stretcher that had down there, and we started back out. And there were Germans all around, and they had followed us as we were carrying him back there. They were behind us all the time. We didn't know it. We looked around, and there were Germans all around the house, and there were maybe half a dozen of us or so in there. The company commander was there, and they threw some hand grenades down in the basement there. They went off and didn't hurt anyone. And we could hear them sizzle as the fuse burned and see the sparks. But anyway, we all ducked down and held our breath, and the things go boom, and no one got hurt. I don't know why we were so lucky. But anyway, we were we had guys standing at all the windows watching her all around. So, and I was in one window right in the corner of the building. It was an L-shaped building. I was down in this corner and standing at the window, and I heard some Germans walking and talking, and they walked right around the end of the building right in front of me, and point blank, maybe 10 foot away, and I shot both of them once, and one of them ducked back around the corner. The other one fell down, got on his hands and knees, started to crawl back. I shot him again, but he continued to get out of sight. Well, shortly thereafter, someone threw a grenade or a shell or something at the window because they'd probably seen my gunfire, and it hit me. The blast hit me in the face and knocked my helmet off, knocked me down. I got up and my eyes were all bloody, and I thought I was completely lost my eyes, but it didn't turn out that way. But anyway, the rest of the night until daylight, we could hear the wounded German around there crying and moaning, and we had the next morning after it got daylight, the German brought up a tank and pointed the gun at the house, and we knew we had either give up or die. So the captain or someone waved a white flag out one of the windows, and the Germans out there said, "Come on out." And so we put down our guns and started out, but the way out was a door on the other side of the basement. As we were the first guy out, I don't remember his name, they shot him. He come rolling back down. I don't know how badly he was hurt, but anyway, we ran back and grabbed our guns. So, well, we're going to have to fight it out. And someone said, "Well, wait, don't. We'll try again." So we waved the flag out that side, and they let us come out then, and we had the one that I had wounded that was still alive. We had to carry him down a ways, maybe a quarter of a mile down into the town, on where they had Germans had an aid station down there on the river, the Rhine. So those of us who were wounded, they put us on a boat and took us across the Rhine, and I went by truck then from there to Baden-Baden. They had all the, at least most fancy hotels in Baden-Baden had been converted to hospitals, and I was taken to one of them, and after they took our clothes, put us in a room, cleaned us up, and shortly I saw a doctor and a surgeon. I had a piece of shrapnel in my right eyeball, and they took it out. He took it out, and I can still remember the feeling as he stitched up that eye. And I wore a patch for a few days, but it saved the eye. The eye later on was my best eye, and they had taken all our clothes, give us pajamas. They wanted to delouse the clothing, they said. But anyway, one of the fellows in the room with me, there were maybe 4 or 5 of us in this one room, had been badly wounded, had a piece of shrapnel or bullet in his brain. He had a hole right in the middle of his forehead, and they'd bandaged him up, and he would get delirious at times and rip off the bandage, and I saw him stick his finger in that hole. Yeah, pretty bad. Part of the time he'd be lucid, and then he'd be out of his mind, and he died one night. after 4 or 5 days there, maybe, and they took him and put him in a room down at the end of the hall that had the windows open. That was their morgue. And a few days later, a nurse and a soldier came to our room with arms loaded with clothing and told us to get dressed. We were going to a funeral. And everyone got dressed except me because my clothing wasn't there. They had lost it or something. And they said, well, we'll take care of that. And they came back with a German uniform and had me dressed in that German uniform. And it fit pretty well. But the officer came in that was to take us to the funeral and saw me in that uniform and came over and started taking off all the ornaments, the emblems and whatever all was on it, stripped it down. And they took us to we marched to a cemetery and in Baden-Baden. We started walking down the guard took us down along the sidewalk, and the German civilians were growling and complaining, and they had to get off the sidewalk to let us through. So then he told us to get out in the street and get off the sidewalk. Anyway, we walked to the cemetery and got there. They had dug a grave. It was a double grave, side by side caskets sitting there, one with a German flag and one with an American flag on it. And that photographer's there with the camera on. He had a camera on a tripod. I don't know if it was a movie camera or a still camera, but anyway, there was a high-ranking German officer in a beautiful dress uniform there. There was a priest in his robes, and they performed this funeral. They had a firing squad there, and the priest did his thing, and the German officer made a speech, and I didn't know much German, and I do remember him saying that in life we were enemies, in death alles Kameraden. We're all friends, all the same in death. But anyway, they buried them there. Well, they had the firing squad fired a volley or two, however many, and we went back to the hospital, and I remember shortly thereafter, I had to go to the doctor, check up on my eye, see how it was doing, and I had a wristwatch, and I'm pretty sure he saw it. He says, "You have a watch?" And I said, "Yes." He said, "Let me have it." So I took it off and gave it to him. I thought, well, goodbye wristwatch. He put it in his desk drawer and took me into a back room there. And he had a thing there on the bench that looked like a big donut with a metal adjustable prong coming out of one side of it. And he says, sit here and stick your head in that thing. And I put my head in that ring, and he adjusted this pointer right in front of my eye. He says, now this is an electromagnet. And he says, I'm going to flip a switch. And he says, if there's any metal in there that I didn't get out, you'll feel it. It'll hurt. It'll pull. He flipped the switch, and I felt nothing. He said, okay, we got it all out. Took me back out and gave me back my watch. And I realized then that the reason he'd taken the watch is because that magnet would have ruined it. And so I spent about a month there in the hospital, and from there they gave me some Red Cross clothing, and had a pair of British shoes and British tweed pants, and an American Army wool overcoat. That was one of the best things I had, because I went through a couple of prison camps, and by that time the Allies were moving into France there, and had crossed the Rhine and were getting closer, so they closed down the prison camp, the last prison camp I was in, and we marched south and east down through Germany, down into Bavaria, and eventually got liberated down in southern Germany. I don't know what else.
Well, is there anything you'd like to talk about after the war, coming home?
No. After the war, I came home, went back to work where I had worked before. Worked for a little while, and I decided I wanted to go back and finish up my college degree. And I went to Purdue and got a semester in there, and decided I didn't want to do that after all. And I went back to work and got into the engineering department then, and spent the next 42 years working at Delco Remy division of General Motors. I've been retired now over 25 years. This is my second reunion. The first one was in Louisville, Kentucky. I don't remember what year that was, but my wife went with me there. Didn't particularly enjoy it. Didn't find anyone I knew, and so I didn't go back to any others until this one. And well, this would be the last one. It was close by, and only 40 miles from here. So we, son-in-law and I, just drove up for the day, and I'm not even staying at the hotel. I'm going back home this evening, and tomorrow I'm coming back for the banquet. My youngest grandson is going to drive me back tomorrow. But my eyes are not good, and I can't drive in the city traffic anymore.
Well, sir, I want to thank you for agreeing to sit down and talk to me again. And of course, now some of your war stories are on tape so the historians can see them. Thank you, sir.